Before I introduce our speakers tonight, we don't often get personal during the introduction, but Ruchika is a dear friend of mine, and she's also quite literally coming back to launch one of her books. This stage is one of the first stages that she ever got to speak on, so it's always special to have her back in the building and with us, and Ijeoma is also no stranger to Town Hall. So let me introduce them both to you formally. Ruchika is the co-founder of Candor, a global inclusion strategy firm, and the author of Inclusion on Purpose. She's a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review and was a founding editor of The Establishment. She's also an adjunct faculty in communications at the University of Washington and at Seattle University. And Ijeoma is a Seattle-based writer, speaker, and internet yeller. She's the author of books So You Want to Talk About Race, Mediocre, and Be a Revolution. Please join me in welcoming both of them to the stage.
Hello. Thank you all for braving this weather. I know that we are Seattleites, but don't try to act like we're not brand new when it rains really hard. So it's wonderful to see you all celebrating my dear friend and her amazing book. I am so honored to be here and celebrating that with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you truly braving this weather. I know it's no small feat on a Thursday night. I know us as Seattleites, so really appreciate it, truly.
Absolutely. So I guess I would love to start with, we've known each other for about 10 years now.
We have. Of course, we look exactly the same.
We do. Still like babies. And so like when I met you, we were working together.
We were.
And so it's been really amazing to watch you build this career talking about the workplace, because we were, at first, the only two women of color in the space we were in, and we had one other woman of color join us. And so we've actually kind of lived this reality together in spaces. And so I just wanted to say, like, as someone who knows you and has seen you first as an editor work around other conversations people were having around this while navigating it yourself, and then write these amazing books and deepen your theory and live what you write about in how you make connections to people. I'm just so proud of you.
Thank you so much.
And so I'm going to start with a question that I'm sure you've had to answer many times, but Uncompete. I would love for you to talk a bit about the title, because it's an interesting title.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. And I will say the biggest pride I take from Uncompete is that it's a word I made up. And I was told, my mother actually, who is here in the audience with us tonight, was was told when I was in kindergarten that I probably wouldn't be able to speak English very well. So to be able to come up with a new word that I've now trademarked in the English language is probably the flex, is probably part of the flex. But in all seriousness, Uncompete is intuitively exactly what it sounds like. It is rejecting the idea that competition at all costs, zero-sum thinking, winner-take-all approaches to life, to the workplace, to the environment, to our liberation need to exist, and instead asks us to embrace abundance, collaboration, radical generosity, and really the idea that there is more than enough room for all of us to succeed if we do it together. Wow, we have a very excited audience.
I mean, it means a lot, and I want to ask about how you came to that, because I feel like it's right now. I mean, I feel like it's part of the American ethos to be competitive against individuals, to measure success based on how you compare to others. But especially right now, I think when we see politically this idea of being the best means defeating others. When we see our government turning away from collective care and literally cutting off aid to people who need it, in this time when there's so much pressure on people saying, if you want to get ahead, you better get your hustle on, you better do all of this, what brings you to not competing, to uncompeting, and working with people? What brought you to that?
Yeah. You know, if this was any other week in this whole year, I would struggle to find an example. But just this week, Zoran Mamdani. I wish I could take credit. Zoran Mamdani became the first South Asian Muslim mayor of New York City, right? I know as a Seattleite, I'm like, but okay, one of the most important cities in the country and in the world, on a campaign solely based on, or very much based on, centering the voices of those most marginalized, very much centering on the identity of, of him being Muslim, of him, understanding the struggles of the working class, talking about the liberation of Palestine. I mean, in a way that was done with, like, centering values and integrity and community. And so I think he very much exemplifies his campaign, as a 34-year-old man, very much exemplifies the ideas of Uncompete in action. So I'm really glad I can point to an example now this week, and it happened on the same day. I happened to be flying out of New York on the day we got the news coming back to Seattle. So that was incredibly exciting. The other thing I think is important to say is, unfortunately, the way politics has been set up to be zero-sum is exactly what causes the type of division and polarization we see today. I've been looking at research from, whether it's Harvard or whether it's other, political think tanks. Again and again, the consensus seems to be, if we did not have a winner-take-all system, if we didn't have a system where literally you can either win the election or you go away, like you slink off into the shadows with your tail between your legs, we would have such a different outcome in this country. We would have so much more liberation and so much more opportunity for all. So I think that there's we really need to talk about what does that mean in our political system. I know that's not what we're here for, but I don't want to discount us imagining and reimagining this process.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with Alexis Pauline Gumbs a few months ago, where she said that individualism is so unnatural that it must be violently enforced by the state. And when we think about that, and we think about the ways in which in the workplace, this culture of competition, not just about competing for a raise, but literally, like, these, how do you get the edge on your competitors if you want to get a job? Like, people build whole careers around this. And then when we add the layer of race and gender and sexuality and disability onto it, and this idea that there are fixed spaces for particular demographics, and then you must beat out these people and then still prove every day that you belong to be there, is so deeply harmful. And when I think about, like, your book, and I think about what Alexis Pauline Gumbs said, the thing I love about your book is how many examples you have, not only of the real harm that this mindset does, but also the examples of what it means to work in other ways and what that can bring. Because I do think that, there is a war on imagination that our oppressors have enacted against us, to tell us, don't you dare imagine other things. Not only don't imagine it, but don't try to seek out what's being done. So I would love to ask you kind of what it was like to be reaching out to, you reached out to so many people that you've known over the years, to collect these stories and kind of spend time not only in, like, the hard parts, but the really rewarding relationships that you have.
Yeah, thank you. And I think where there was a real evolution from inclusion on purpose, which was very much around, like, here are the tactical ways that we approach, a lack of inclusion, a lack of equity in the workplace. What can you actually do to make change? What I wanted to do with this book was say, like, look at how beautiful it can be when we choose to be the change that we want to see. We choose to, if I may, be a revolution, because it starts with us. It has to be with us. And so when I was able to go to these really beautiful, largely women of color in my life and say, you embody this spirit of joy and kindness. I'm raising a 9-year-old son. He's here today too. And part of my fear is the lack of imagination we have also for young boys of color who in so many ways are let down by the system that doesn't believe in community care and doesn't allow boys to be soft and kind. I mean, one of my favorite chapters in the book starts with the story of a cup that my mother gave me when my son was born that said, always be extraordinary. And I drink from it. I was like hustling. I was trying to raise a kid, start my business, write all these articles, write these books, do all these speaking engagements, all the things, exhausted all the time, exercise, sleep, meet friends, all of the other things too. And what's really interesting is that about 2 years ago, this cup became from always be extraordinary. Somehow the extraordinary disappeared, but the words always be remained. Literally, it was just be. You are allowed to be who you are. And as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as a child of immigrants, it felt really revolutionary to be able to do that and to, in many ways, be told that, through this gift that my mother had given me. The last thing I want to say, which I think is really important, is when I did, at a time where we were talking about equity and inclusion very widely, and I'd be asked to speak to these large audiences, and you and I know this, what it's like. You'd be paid lots of money, and then you'd go up on stage, and as you're leaving, there's is this really going to make a difference? Is this really going to change hearts and minds? And fortunately, I did find examples where they did, and inevitably there'd be some question, whether it was directly asked or couched in a way, but the question would always inevitably show up oh, yes, we care about women. Yes, we care about people of color. Yes, we think mental health is important. Yes, we think disability is important. But what about the white man? No, but what about the men? If we start a women's, an ERG that focuses on women, we're really scared that the men in leadership are going to feel, we're not prioritizing them. And that became the genesis of the zero-sum thinking that really started bothering me, and then I would see it across in different ways, which I have detailed in the book.
Absolutely, I've seen that, and it's so interesting to me because they do feel left out every time. You don't get white men coming up and saying, I didn't think this was right, but you proved me wrong. They'll be like, I hated every minute of it.
Yeah.
And studies back that up, right? Studies back that up, that white men expect every workplace they're in to reflect them, not only in their quote unquote values, but in looks. And if it starts to not in any particular way, they over-exaggerate how much it doesn't look like them, and they actually stop working as hard. So if a workplace hires a woman or a person of color into a high position, studies have shown that white men will stop producing as much because they don't feel as invested in the space they're in. Can you imagine?
And
I'm just trying to imagine for walking into a workplace and being I'm not feeling it. I wish I could.
Yeah.
But if I had the luxury to be I'm going to pull back in this space and expect to keep my job, expect to be able to feed my family, if I thought I could protest someone in leadership not looking like me at a workplace, let alone just bringing up why don't we have more people that look like us, right? Like the thought of one person coming into a space. And so, yeah, when we're doing this work and you go in, the people who need to be in that room the most aren't there or aren't listening or have decided it's not for them. And what needs to happen in the space is different. But I will add to that, I believe in y'all. For the few white men who dared come here, I believe in you. I believe you can hear a thing that makes you uncomfortable. I believe you can enter a room where the leaders don't look like you and you can get over it and grow.
And you know, Ijeoma, I want to say this very plainly. One of the things that I really wanted to do with this book that was important to me is to call out the way, especially, there's so much of scarcity mentality in South Asian communities, like the one I come from. There's so much of anti-Blackness. The level of care and abundance and kindness I have seen specifically from Black women, and you know this, I have said this to you time and time again, I've said it, I hope I reflect this, but what I want to say is, if we start every conversation with, but what about me, right? Like if I hear you talk about what it means to be a Black woman in the workplace and Black women's liberation, if I hear that and I'm like, yeah, but what about me? Like, I'm South Asian too, I'm an immigrant too, we're not gonna get anywhere, right? Our liberation is so interlinked. So part of it is, yes, I had to get uncomfortable with that. I had to be comfortable with that discomfort that, hey, my voice isn't being centered when we talk about, racial justice. And then unlearn that and then begin the beautiful journey of understanding how much our liberation is linked. So my hope is that, especially for folks here who might hear us talking about this, may not have the context of our work and may think like, oh, here she is, like, what are we talking about? Like, I feel uncomfortable. I just want to say, like, that discomfort is so necessary for us to get to this beautiful place of imagination.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will also say, if you're worried about the discomfort you're feeling is no match to the discomfort that women and people of color feel in these spaces each and every day. And so that discomfort exists from lack of communication, lack of understanding, and a power imbalance. And it's just that certain people feel like they should never have to feel it, that it should always be on the shoulders of other people, especially in the workplace. And so one thing I love about your book, because this is what thing I find I struggle with in my work and in my work relationships, is getting people to understand what's on the other side of discomfort. Getting people to have faith that, yeah, you can say the wrong thing, you can really offend some people, have an awkward conversation about how you said the wrong thing because you didn't know any better, and you can still set goals, work through it, make amends, and come through on the other side stronger and better. And you can create a new space. And getting people to see what that looks like, because honestly, those are spaces that we have to create to survive. So even when we worked together, we would have like little side meetings and things like that.
Those text conversations were next level.
Yes, because that's how we survived. And it's also how we stayed connected and shared opportunities with people. And because we weren't just talking about like, help me get through this. It was also like, do you know someone who's a good fit for this? Or can we get advice on this?
Yeah.
On the other side of that sort of collaborative relationship that we've been doing to get by is available to everyone, but you have to do the work to be a part of it.
Yeah.
You don't just get to show up and be like, let me in, without building an authentic relationship.
Yeah.
So I would love to actually talk about what you were saying earlier. You were talking about this extraordinary wearing off the cup. And I want to talk about that too, because I feel like when I met you, you were very much in the, I am the new businesswoman.
Yes.
And I can do everything. And you were trying to do everything.
I was trying really hard. I was exhausted.
And so seeing you now having this fuller life, and I mean, I think you're still doing quite a lot. I can tell you're just still doing, like your definition of a little less of everything is still a lot. But what does it mean now to have that space in your life? Because I know I've also been trying to think more about like, what is my work, and is my work just the hours I'm grinding away? Or is my work how I care for myself, my community, my friends? What does it mean now that we're 10 years older? Now that you have all this experience, now you have multiple books under your belt, what does work life mean to you right now in the context of this book, in the context of your life and your family?
Yeah, thank you, Ijeoma. That's so generous of you to say, because there's this concept of the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much you achieve, you'll never be satisfied. There will always be a bigger goal. There will always be a bigger thing that you should achieve. Your book became a bestseller, but it didn't become that bestseller, right? Like you got the promotion, but someone else made more money than you. And that hedonic treadmill, it's just, you're on it and you're never satisfied. And I think that is at the heart of Uncompete, because what starts to happen is we are told in so many ways, in very deliberate ways, especially in capitalistic, competitive environments, that no matter what you do, you're not worthy. And that lack of self-worth starts to eat away at us. And I think we start taking really damaging actions, both to other people in our community and certainly to ourselves. And so for me, I had to unlearn the idea that my productivity was related to my self-worth. And it's hard to do. I have my literary agent here from New York, and I hope you're not like, oh my gosh, like Ruchika's gonna go and hang out on the couch now for the rest of her life. And I think that's with Uncompete, there was that question, right? In the book, there was this question of like, does it mean that you don't have any ambition? But if I think about what Uncompete means, it's about not rejecting ambition, but it's really about reframing and redefining ambition to integrate with every part of your life, with your wellness, with your health. And in doing so, we practice solidarity with our communities that are disabled. We practice solidarity with our communities that experience chronic illness. We practice solidarity with our communities that have been so marginalized by the system that says you are only worthy when you are producing.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful and so important. And I'll say too, Seattle, I think, struggles with this uniquely because Seattle's known for its workforce. It's known for its financial security. And I say that knowing that that means the erasure, right, of so many people who are cut out of that reality. But there's also something really unique about Seattle in this very, like, hygge type mentality where people work to become very comfortable and well off, and they don't even throw a party. They're like, let me squirrel it away, and I will still buy my jeans from Costco, and you'll never know. I'll just get a new North Face jacket every year, and that's how you'll know I'm okay. My Subaru will have new tires. And it's not even going towards experiences, family. Like, I've been at other places where people are like, I'm earning money, and we talk about this, right? Younger generations are earning money for experiences, and I feel like Seattle actually discourages people from even enjoying what this over-productivity is. They're like, oh, that seems a bit flashy. Don't have fun with your friends. And then it's like, what are people working for? People are working to save for this bunker, this house they're gonna build in money. And I find that's really hard. And I think right now when people are feeling so scared, because that's all falling apart. People are learning. Even if you live in Seattle, you could lose your job. Even if you lose in Seattle, ICE could come through and rip apart your neighborhood or your family, or you could be persecuted, or you could say the wrong thing, or all these prices could go up. All these things could happen to you. And then you don't actually have the community that can get you through it. And so I would love it if you could talk a little bit to Seattle in particular as to what there is to gain from letting go of this competitive mindset and really starting to think with intention and with a justice mindset as well as to what it means to uncompete.
I'm so glad you asked this question, because I'll start with the personal, right? Like that competitive mindset of being in Seattle where you would meet people and, they're launching the next big thing and they're like working on this product that's going to save the world, and you're, launching like a $1 million like fund, which is going to like change everything. When you meet people like that all the time, or that's the conversations, there's a lot of like humble brag, but there's definitely the brag part of it. You very much feel unworthy. And I definitely came into this city 13 years ago feeling a sense of unworthiness, right? I moved as a journalist in Atlanta to Seattle, to where my partner was, at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. And I had no friends. It was really hard to meet friends. And I felt like I was totally unworthy until I got my first job, which was absolutely miserable because it was in technology and I was not built for that world. And even then, my focus was on like building my professional community, or my professional network, I should say. I do differentiate between network and community, really ecosystem, because I believe in that interdependence and the interlinking of all of us. And where I felt that most acutely was when I became a mom. Suddenly my professional networking did nothing, right? There was no one I could text at 3 a.m. when I'm not sleeping, when things are really hard. There was nobody. And that was one of the hardest lessons I learned. That's when I realized that you could have the best network in the world, right? You could be connected to like CEOs and whatever it is, but nobody's going to save you when you're alone crying at 3 a.m., because your baby won't sleep. And that really was the biggest wake-up call for me. I think that became the start of like that real focus on how do I invest in community. And in doing so, you have to show up. I mean, the fact that I know so many of you here are my friends in some way, shape, or form, and you battled the rain, you battled everything else to be here. It's because it requires that. It requires us to show up. It requires us to be uncomfortable. It does. It's uncomfortable. Is it easier to sit in your room and, or in your office and, churn out something else, productivity that might get you a promotion, or leave everything, actually put on pants and then, have to show up? Of course it's harder. Of course it requires so much more energy. And that for me is at the heart of Uncompete as well. We are forced to, for so many reasons, think about our life in the short term. And what Uncompete does is really guides us to think about our life in the long term, take the long view, for our lives and our communities as an ecosystem, not just like, what's the next productivity thing that I can do?
That's beautiful. And it's so important. And talking about that, like, I definitely feel that. And we're going to be going to questions in just a minute. So think of questions. Don't do the awkward Seattle thing. You can also send questions to this handy dandy tablet. Is there? You can scan a photo if you want to send it there. So if you don't, otherwise there are microphones as well. Where?
On this side. If you could be on this side, then the microphone on this side, please.
You can come up and ask them. And so, good. People are making their way up right now. So while that's doing that, we're just gonna hang out for a second. While everyone
I love it.
figures
I
out
feel like this is really a
technology.
community of friends.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you both. It's such an honor to be here tonight.
Thank you, Sarah.
Ruchika, could you please talk a little bit about, as a daughter of immigrants who interacts a lot with different waves of immigrants coming to the United States, particularly South Asians, but many of different walks, and talk a little bit about the difference between being in survival mode and thriving. Because when I speak to people about this concept of not competing in order to be able to survive in this country, it's really a hard conversation, because for many of them it's like, well, my kids need to be able to do better so they have access to resources so that they can thrive. And I would love to hear, obviously I haven't read your book yet, but I plan to. If you can speak to that, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that question. I'm really glad you asked it, because of course there's nuance to this. I think one of the realities is even the type of visa that you come into this country, or the type of way that you come into this country, the entire process is riddled with scarcity. It's riddled with like, you are only here because you produce, and if you don't produce, you're going to get kicked out, or that you're in survival mode. And I don't want to downplay that. I don't want to downplay that the systems were very much designed for us to live with scarcity. They were designed for us to feel like we have to elbow others out of the way to get ahead. I don't want to downplay that. And what I find is so many of us, especially who are children of immigrants, whose parents or who our communities did the work to get us that leg up, or we have the leg up, even then, so many of us operate with that scarcity mentality. If I'm being honest, some of the most painful interactions I've had in the workplace and in our communities has been with other South Asian women who don't want to show up, who don't want to be, who are so worried that even if you're in a completely different field, but if I show up for you, somehow that's going to take away from me, even though we're doing very, very different things. And so I think so much of what our liberation and what the next step, if we really talk about Uncompete as reimagining the world to be a more just place, it requires us to reject and evolve out of that scarcity thinking, move out of survival mode and into one where truly we thrive together as a community. I talk a lot more about this in the book, and but thank you for this question. Definitely one I've thought a lot about, for sure.
Love that. You have a question?
Hi, thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate the concept of the book. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. It's something that's been bothering me for a long, long time, and the industries I've worked in have always been trying to gamify everything and turning it into a zero-sum game, winner-take-all, and it never made any sense to me. I was on a creativity committee once, which is an oxymoron in of itself, and every activity I tried to do to help people realize they could be creative was turned into, and now we had to have a judge to figure out who's got the best creativity. I'm like, no, it's a participation award. Just doing this is what's important. Yeah. There is a mindset, and I have a suspicion it's tied to the patriarchy, that there is a fixed pie and everyone else is taking from my piece of it. And that's not universal, not everyone feels like that, but what can we do to so-called reach across the aisle to those folks that think it's a zero-sum game and help them understand, no, it's not. It really isn't. What's the data we can show them? What can we do to argue with them? Or are they in a cult? And is there something else we have to do to help them?
Thank you so much for this question. I think the most powerful way we can do this is by modeling a different way. And one of the things that started happening, one of the things I write about in my book is a few years ago, after my last book, Inclusion on Purpose, came out, I felt really lucky. Like, the book did really well. Suddenly I was like getting checks in the mail. I was like, oh, wow, like sometimes, sometimes there's like this rainbow when you write a book. Not all the time, but this time there was. And one of the first things I wanted to do was celebrate it with my community. So I put together a dinner of people in my life who had mostly indirectly impacted the book. Of course, Ijeoma was there. Ijeoma had, written the foreword. She was, so kind to host my last book launch. But most people were sort of, there were people who picked up my kid from school, for example. There were people who brought me meals, like after I had given birth, like those sorts of things. And I think being able to model what it's like to live in an abundant community helps more of us see that it's possible to live not with a very, very finite pie, but really the way that I've been thinking about this is planting seeds in a garden so that everyone has a chance to eat. I did see that someone else talk about this too. It is so important to think about, like, how do I plant those seeds so that everyone can eat, and it's not just about me getting my piece of the pie. So the start for me has come from modeling what I would like to see, and in some ways that I wasn't modeled myself.
I love that. And it reminds me of what my therapist is always telling me, which is like, because I just want to take the controls of everyone's life.
That's right.
And be like, if you just, I know the answer, if you could just do the thing. And my therapist always tells me one of the most important things you can do to help others is to heal publicly.
Yes.
But also
So
I will
beautiful.
say, world building is really important. So if you have a creative mindset and you're in these spaces, a lot of times people really don't have any vision for what a new space could be. So when I go into a space, I do this a lot in colleges and universities, high schools, middle schools. I say, let's design your classroom from the ground up. If you walked in and you said, this serves me, and I leave here feeling seen and heard, and like I learned what I wanted to learn, or I got done what I wanted to get done, and it contributed to my life and my relationships and made me feel healthy, would you be in this building? Would you be in a different one? Like, how would you relate to people? How would your conversations go? Getting people used to imagining a different outcome, and it has them imagining like them as whole people and not people trying to just get through a space. People sometimes need to be guided through that because they don't know how. And so, like, as you're saying, you're in a more creative mindset, having those conversations where you're kind of walking people step by step through the vision you already see and helping them find their own vision, I think can also really help.
Thank you for your thoughtful and actionable answers.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, let me interject here with one of the, oh, we got one more? Just these? Okay, all right.
Sorry, guys.
Could you talk about how, like, all the things you've been, like, talking about so far relate to, like, queer issues or experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing this up. It's so important and necessary. I think one of the big challenges we see in our world is that we are so quick to, and Ijeoma referenced this as well, is we're so quick to box people into identities without recognizing, again, how much we are all interlinked and our liberation is interlinked. I think especially when it comes to thinking about and centering queer issues, I think we see so much of what I'm trying to model in Uncompete and trying to talk about in Uncompete in queer communities, in communities that have faced so much of marginalization and have been left out of the conversation. One of the most important things for me, and one of the big decisions I made in my life, is I grew up in a country where, at least when I was growing up until very recently, it was against the law to be openly part of the LGBTQ community. And one of the decisions that I very, very actively made is not only did I want to, make Seattle our home base, and we've continued to make it, we moved here for a job, but after that, to continue being here, being able to raise my child and being part of a community that has largely been so LGBTQ affirming. I mean, I travel around the world, I travel around this country, was extremely necessary and important for me in the decisions I've made. So I think the amount of abundance that I have seen modeled in LGBTQ communities and queer communities has been so much part of what I imagine for the future and what I actually see, right, when we talk about modeling right now.
I love that. And I'll say too, as a queer person, the pressures that we talk about that are on immigrant communities, communities of color, are also put on queer communities, especially people who are visibly queer, to try to assimilate into this white, male, straight idea of power, especially in the business, if you want to be taken seriously. And so I've known so many other queer people who, even if they're not hiding their queerness, are shaping their queerness into a mold that says, I can be one of the guys, or I can be in this particular space. Or for queer women, I can up this femininity that maybe isn't authentic to me. That pressure to perform to white patriarchal standards hits the queer community as well. It also means that many people, when they try to perform that, adopt anti-Blackness and racism in the workplace as well as a way of appeasing to it. So I have met many white queer people in the workplace who make friends with their white peers by denigrating Black people and other people of color in the workplace as well. So recognizing that we're all being conditioned to fit this stereotype that doesn't serve us is really, really important so that we don't sell our souls out and harm other people who could be our comrades in this fight for liberation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We're done.
All right, we have like 2 more questions. I think we just have a couple more minutes.
And a half, maybe Matab as well.
2.5. Divide it amongst yourselves.
No,
So like you have 3/4 of a question each.
A mega question that builds on each other's is the way that I would.
Mine lands in the mental health for the individual arena. I have a friend who gave me a great New Year's resolution that she made up one year, which was uncomfortable conversations lead to better futures.
Yes.
And that was really what I was hearing from you tonight. Yeah. So as an individual, when you have an uncomfortable conversation to have, how do you do that? How do you allow yourself to have that uncomfortable conversation and be that vulnerable?
Yeah, with someone else that I meet and have or hear uncomfortable conversations. Which one? Or
it's a little bit of, I know that if I have this uncomfortable conversation with someone, we will have a better relationship, we will have a better situation, they'll be more aware, something will change if I can open up my throat and have that uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
Thank you. This is such a good question. I think the first actual question, and this is different, this is what has changed in me and my journey to Uncompete. The old Ruchika would have said, oh, the answer is you just got to get okay with it. It doesn't matter if it harms you. It doesn't matter if it bothers your mental peace, because it's more important that you try and figure this out and you do the work of education. And this version of me, the one that has worked on this book, the hardest chapter to write was around rest and the importance of listening to your body and being embodied, which is why I'm very glad that Melissa is also asking a question. Being embodied has meant that my first question is actually to myself. Am I in the right place to have this conversation? How does it serve me? How will I take care of myself? And what does the longevity of this relationship mean to me to have this uncomfortable conversation? That's where I begin. The other thing that I do, which is the way that I deal with uncomfortable situations, is I activate and mobilize my community, my ecosystem. So I'll say, like, hey, I'm about to go have this really uncomfortable conversation. I need support. How can we work together on this, right? And there are times where I know that a relationship would be better off with me having an uncomfortable conversation, but because in doing so I'm going to let myself down, I choose myself in that moment. And that has been a big act of learning for me, because again, coming from so many various intersecting marginalized identities, other people's comfort being prioritized was the way that I have approached the world for far too long. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. For people who are working in like small business owners, and you know, the marketing messaging we're all kind of taught is very much zero sum. The best blah 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 in this region for this demographic. Yeah. That is the language that we're taught how to market, and it really shuts down kind of this ability to kind of like share like this abundance mentality. It very much feeds on this scarcity mindset.
Yes.
And so I feel like it might, what I would love is in those moments when we need a little pep talk of like, okay, I am in this mindset of I have to be considered number one, or I have to be considered the best, and I have to talk not crappy about my competitor, but I certainly am not going to speak glowingly about them. How do I navigate something like that while holding my integrity and serving the people that I want to serve? And how do people who are in the thick of it, because I get in those moments where I have the abundance, I'm like, of course, this makes perfect sense, no duh. And then I have those moments when I'm just like, I have to get back into that competitive mindset to survive.
I totally understand. And again, I want to reiterate how much our systems are designed to make us feel like that. And especially from someone who runs a small business too, like some months I'm like, yeah, everything's great, let's have a party. Some months I'm like, oh my gosh, how will I pay the bills for the next few months? I understand that deeply. And the systems are very much designed to have us feeling that way. And if we take a moment to really tap into how do we feel in those moments when we have had to trash talk our competitor or put someone else down or constantly be on that hamster wheel, it's really, really clear how damaging it is for us. And again, when we think about it from the short-term perspective, right? The short term is, okay, maybe I beat out the competitor, right? But then you still have to wake up with yourself the next morning. And if you're a person with integrity, I've talked to so many, especially women leaders, really senior women leaders, some recognizable names, who say that every time I've had to do that, no matter how much it was like, in that moment, it was like she won, in the end, I still felt like I lost. So I think that there is something about this, which is seeing your life and your business in the long term. I've talked in the book, I've written about how much building together, referring business to other people who people would have thought are my competitors, who the world told me are my competitors. I write about a dear friend, Bethia, who used to live in Seattle. Literally, there are times we were pitching the same client for business and she won. And in that moment, I had a choice. Do I care about the long-term relationship of our friendship so that years on end, we can still be friends? Or in that moment, am I gonna be like, okay, I lost, so I'm gonna like disparage her? And that's a decision that we get to make. We have agency over that. Thank you. Thank you.
Ruchika, thank you so much for your work. I've started reading your book and it's just been so affirming and I've enjoyed it tremendously, especially as a woman of color. My mantra has always been lift as you climb within community, and it's been heartbreaking. And so reading about your experience about talking, sometimes our biggest heartbreaks are when other women of color, I believe in lifting as you climb, but in these systems, they've been conditioned that the other person's the enemy. So often in these spaces, even hearing things or telling myself things like, not all skin folk are kinfolk is a hard one to swallow. But I understand that these systems are designed how they are. I'm grateful for your scholarship and for yours as well. And I think about the work of Parker Palmer, where he talks about that as a collective humanity, we're in this space of a tragic gap. We know that systems that we're living under are no longer working. And there are scholars like the two of you who are imagining new ways of coexisting. But those systems aren't in place yet. Yes. So we're in that in-between place. What is your advice for equity leaders, for people who are in the work of liberation? What is your advice to those of us who are in this in-between space?
Yeah. I know we're getting close to time, so I'll say the number one has to be our ecosystem and our community, and really being very grounded in feeding into, in investing, in building solidarity with people who are doing the work that we're doing. This is a really, really hard time. I don't want to sugarcoat it. It was hard enough to ask people to come out at this time where we're all feeling so much fear and uncertainty. Polycrises is some of the ways that I've heard it be described. And still, the way that we get through this is really together. It has to be in our small groups, in our texts, in our chats, in our communities that we come together with. It is truly the only way that we're going to liberate ourselves, right? Because the systems are not out there to save us. Sometimes that also means we set boundaries with people who might be the same skin color or same identities as us, but they don't practice solidarity with us. And that resistance to is an act of justice, and that resistance too is an act of self-care.
All right. Well, my time up here is done. It's
Thank you.
always wonderful. I'm so excited for the rest of this conversation and for your book. And I love you and I'm very proud of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ijeoma. Don't go anywhere, there's more. So now I'd like to invite up on stage Lakita Williams, Dr. Ekin Yasin, and my mother, Seema Tulshan, who is today's special guest. All right. While they're walking up, let me read their bios in order of. Dr. Ekin Yasin is a professor, researcher, and program leader with expertise in communication, emerging technologies, and leadership development. As director of the Communication Leadership Graduate Program at the University of Washington, her work explores how technology transforms identity, storytelling, influence, and global development, AI-integrated curriculum design, and responsive education models that meet the needs of a shifting global landscape. On my left here is Lakita Williams. She's the founder and principal strategist of Co-Create Work, a future-focused coaching and consulting firm specializing in executive coaching and organizational development. With a background in social work and a certified professional coach, she developed the 5 components of inclusive culture, a framework helping organizations build responsive, human-centered workplaces. She also teaches at the University of Washington's Communication Leadership Graduate Program, where her courses on resilient and inclusive leadership for the future of work prepare leaders to build cultures of trust, collaboration, and equity. Her writing has appeared in Harvard Business Review and MSNBC Know Your Value. And then there is Seema Tulshan, today's special mystery guest, who is all the way here from Singapore. She's my mother. She is one of the first and only Indian female residential real estate developers in Singapore, and is also a mother of 3, of which I am the oldest. This book, Uncompete, is me trying to capture the philosophy of a woman who my whole life belongs to.
So, I'm personally so thrilled to be here, and I want to thank you for this book, Ruchika, and also thank you for the friendship you model for all of us. I think a lot of the book is also inspired by what you model. I think that world and community building that you talked about in the questions is something you do every day in your life, so thank you for that. We're all, I think, here thrilled to celebrate you today. So with that, I wanted to maybe start with one question that I wanted you to maybe say a bit more about. We talked about competition. We talked about a lot of different ways in which we're feeling like our potentials and our world is not matching how we want to live. But in the title, you also talk about unlocking success. As an educator, I work with graduate students, some of whom are here, and they're amazing. One of the common conversations we have is they're always around success. People invest in themselves, and redefining success is, I think, part of the work. So in the title, you say, we reject competition to unlock success. So can you tell us a bit more about what does it mean to unlock success?
Thank you. This is such a good question. I think there are so many layers of this book that are relevant to what success means. So some part of it is, and in the beginning of the book, because my hope is, I'm taking people on a journey, because what I'm hoping people will realize is competition is so ingrained. It's the water we swim in. That is literally what one of the chapters is called, because it is everywhere and we don't even think about it. It is normal to, at the end of a marathon that you have run, be asked, what was your time? When is the next one? When are you getting for, but are you going to do one of those famous ones? And it's never about reveling in the fact that you actually completed a marathon, or maybe you didn't and you just tried, and that's good enough too. So I really wanted to dismantle a lot of these competition is everywhere myths that sometimes we don't even think about, but they're really prevalent in our lives. And so the next part of the book, as I get towards the end, is about really asking ourselves, what does success mean to us, and defining it to ourselves. In the middle of the book, what I really wanted to do is present examples and data that show that actually some of the biggest innovations in history, some of the things that have meant true success, whether it's unlocking shareholder value or whether it's changing lives for people. I end the book with the example of Jonas Salk, who discovered the polio vaccine and refused to patent it, right? Because he wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance. And and now in this country, at least for now, we have eradicated polio. We shall see what happens in the future. And I think there's this real focus on understanding how much success can mean collective success, and not just us as individual success. But again, that requires imagination, and it requires us absolutely rejecting a very narrow definition of success that comes from competition.
Thank you. Thank you for writing Uncompete.
Thank you.
It is helping us to build what's next. And so possibility thinking is something that we talk about all the time and build in the future. One of the things I love about the book is that you outline what systems need to change, but also what we need to do as individuals. And you share so many personal examples of the transformation and thinking that you have had. So I'm curious, why is it important to talk about both? And also, how do we stretch towards possibility as individuals?
Yeah, thank you. And I have to say, Lakita is my business coach, is how we originally met. You met me at a time where I thought, growing my business meant I had to do everything myself, and how much you coached me to recognize the importance of getting support, of building, a business that was well beyond me, defining how much making sure that other people would succeed while I was succeeding too was so important. So I want to give you your flowers, because that is very much part of this book as well. And I think when you taught me the power of abundance in actual business terms, in actual business value terms, that was really important and necessary. And so indeed, as so much of this book is about the recognition that systems are made up of individuals. They're made up of people too. And so every time we look at a system which feels absolutely like we can't change anything, it can't be done, we have to look for examples of individuals that are doing things differently, right? And again, like Zoran Mamdani is a great example in the political sphere. I've looked at so many incredible business owners as I was thinking of, do I want to be one of those people that are constantly on, that feels depleted at the end of the day, that only feels worthy because I'm making money? Or is there a different way to do this? And is there a different system I can create as an individual by making those choices?
And you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. So, Mom, she's really nervous, everyone. How did you build an abundance mindset in such a competitive environment like Singapore, right? Like, we literally grew up being told, like, by the founders of our modern country that, Singapore went from a third world, his words, third world to first world in a matter of a few generations because we work harder than anyone else. And then you came to Singapore from India as a 21-year-old immigrant, and all around us in our community, especially in the Indian diaspora community in Singapore, so much was about comparison, stack ranking, whose child is better, whose family is better, who's making more money, all of that. How did you build an abundance mindset? I tried to capture it in the book, but I didn't. But it was very hard, I will say.
Well, it's hard to put it into words because there was no plan or a strategy to go the other way. But definitely people around us were very men and women constantly bragging about their jobs, their careers, their beautiful homes, the parties that they threw and the food that they served, and even the children. Each one's child was super successful in class and sports and whatever they did, like the bragging would be ultimate. And I didn't like that. I found that very toxic and a very pretensive kind of environment. So what I wanted, I couldn't control the outside world, but I could control my home. I could control what I was teaching to my children. And so that's what I did. I tried to create a home of love, a secure kind of space where y'all could learn different things, explore different things, and just shine and be yourselves, I think that's what you might have seen. I didn't plan anything.
No. Yeah, I experienced it. We experienced it, and everyone who does, has for, all these decades.
We have to ask the other two kids also.
My siblings are here too, one from Singapore, one from New York. So for me, when I wrote this book, I really envisioned how do we gather around this book? Especially as I got into launch week, the book launched on Tuesday. I said, I'm going to really try and step away from any lists or any awards or any other accolades that I'm supposed to, and really think about how do I gather community so that even after this, hopefully long after this, you're still thinking about the conversations you've heard today. Ekin, you obviously have an incredible resume. Dr. Ekin, which I know you'll never let me call you. But in the book and in our decade, we moved to Seattle in the same, in a matter of the same few months in 2013. So apart from having this incredible career as an education leader, you so kindly shared your Pasta Sunday ritual and the way that you have embodied community gathering both personally and professionally. Please share with the community here, how you do that. How do you think about this?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Ruchika, also featuring the story of the Pasta Sunday, which is actually a simple gathering every Sunday. For those of you in the audience to reach out to me, I try to gather friends and friends of friends, or people who just find out that I do something like this as a way of bringing people together. But the way it started is in 2019, my mom passed away. And my mom was a big host, and I think we all learn from different family members certain traits that really resonate with us, that give us some different kind of grounding, a different sense of abundance, different sense of maybe being together, different sense of joy. So when my mom passed away, and I didn't want to be super public about it, I was working, just took on a job. I continued on, and I didn't want to kind of express it so outwardly all the time, but I still felt like I had to do something to commemorate my mom, to create a space that had nothing to do with my work, and it didn't have to do with my life even, but a space where we remembered her and where we kind of took a pause. So for the past now 6 years, which marks, of course, how long also my mom hasn't been on this earth, I've been trying to gather every Sunday that I can people and raise a glass or for anything for her and share recipes. This is something she started doing. My parents always made pasta on Sundays. We ate pasta on other days too, but it was specifically marked on those days. So, the experience of it, I think, these kind of marked occasions that have no purpose of competition, right? They can't be. When someone is not feeling well, or when you lose someone during grief, you cannot compete. Grief is not computable. You don't want to be more grieved than someone else. You can only have community, you can only have love, and you can only have sorrow. But the experience itself opened itself up in different ways that I didn't imagine. I had in years past, because I share it also sometimes online, and share pictures of my mom and what I made, so that it's a way also for those who love her, who are in distance, to create some space and time for her. But I have heard from other people that I know who lost loved ones. I realized that such spaces actually created deeper connection than I've ever imagined. I've heard from students who took the chance to be vulnerable with me and share the life experience that related to mine. And then we actually created deeper bonds. So I kind of gave, maybe through my mom and through the Pasta Sundays, it gave a license to connect in a deeper level. In your book, so you so thoughtfully talk about how to uncompete. And I feel like, and you talk a lot about deep relationships. I think during these Pasta Sundays allowed me to cultivate a space where such deep relationships could flourish. And I was so happy to, and I still am very happy to share many of those with you, your mom, and Paras and Veer as well. So.
Thank you. And may I actually, if I can take a pause, and I want to say something about Ekin talking about the earlier part where in Seattle, Ijeoma guided us and challenged us to think about community building and how we really don't prioritize it. So I was 2 months into my life in Seattle. I was fairly miserable. I had made no friends. I would go up to people and be like, "Hi, I'm, so-and-so, would you like to meet?" And they'd be like, "Sure, of course. Well, I'll call you." Nobody ever called me. So I meet Ekin at a party. Ekin and her wonderful husband, Matt, they had just moved from New York, both to be at the University of Washington. Ekin said, we started chatting. We had, a lot in common. I had lived in New York too. Ekin said, I really like to host brunches. I'll definitely call you. And 2 months of facing so much of rejection, I was like, yeah, it's definitely never gonna happen. So, went back, like, as always, I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, yet another one where, like, I'm not even gonna allow myself to be hopeful. And true to form, 2 days later, Ekin invited me to brunch, Ekin and Matt, into their beautiful home on Queen Anne. Brunch, I was like, oh, okay, brunch. Like, here in America, people bring I was like, maybe I'll bring some orange juice. So we picked up orange juice, and I get there, and literally the table, I kid you not, it is from a third of the stage to this third of the stage, filled with food. And an incredible community of people who are also new to Seattle from all demographic backgrounds, all languages, all cultures. And you embodied that. So, the legacy of, I feel so lucky to have met your wonderful mom. She was very much part of our lives too. And you embody her so beautifully and from the moment I met you. And I challenge more Seattleites to find ways to do that as well. Yeah. So, my dear Lakita, in my book, I interviewed you about the fact that navigating chronic illness or disability is often seen as counter to ambition. But you've thought about this so beautifully in your expertise in, culture building and executive coaching, as well as in your personal experience. Could you please share more?
Yeah, thank you for that. First, I want to say that for me, ambition means impact. And I think it's uniquely human to want to have impact. That's something that is important to all of us. And so when we think about that need to have impact, if we take that away from anyone, we're taking away their humanity. So as I managed a diagnosis that I received in 2020 of multiple sclerosis, it was one of the most challenging experiences that I've ever had. And as someone who considers myself super ambitious, want to have a lot of impact. If you look at, I get emotional in the Nike commercials. I'm like, just do it, right? Knock it out. That's me. And so a lot of times I hear folks who have chronic illness and they say you're a different person before that diagnosis and then after. And so after, I thought, okay, that I'll never be able to reach any of my dreams. All of this was a big thing. And I thought, well, as time went on, I'm taking away my own humanity, right? Because if impact is something that's so important to me, then I need to think about this differently. And so how do I shift from, I think the mindset there was competition. I'm in competition with me, right? It's me against me. And you write about this so beautifully in Uncompete, which is how do we get out of competition with ourselves? And so it was a lot of work for me to do that. I had to shift from I'm in competition with myself to I'm in collaboration with myself. And what does collaboration with oneself look like? And I think that shift changed everything for me. And so it meant I can continue to have the impact that I want to have, and I need to think about and do things different. And that's what you're challenging us to do in Uncompete. And all of us have that opportunity. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about illness, so excuse me if I'm getting passionate, is that whether we're well, whether we have illness, think about how you can collaborate with yourself now. How do you collaborate with your body now? So if you are uncompeting externally, how do you do that uncompete internally as well? Thank you for your leadership on
Thank you.
all that we are aiming to change as well. It's transformational to know you, so it's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Lakita. I think one of the most radical acts of resistance we can do in this time is to prioritize that, to prioritize our care, taking care of ourselves, taking care of community care, like our community at a time where, again, you're just constantly supposed to both compete with each other and also with yourself. So it actually is, quite radical. Okay, I know we're coming closer to our time, but Mom, I would love to ask you a question as well. So,
Being put in a spot.
I think one of the things that I didn't write about it as much in the book, but as I've started having conversations about Uncompete in the world, is really around sibling rivalry and rivalries among families. I didn't go into a lot of detail in this. I did like little bits, but not in so much detail. So I'm really intrigued by how, having 3 children, how you manage rivalry, and didn't create competition. I mean, for us to be so close, for us to fly from different parts of the world, leave behind 2 young children to be here, which is my sister from Singapore, to support. Is there some advice you have around that?
No, I think we've all seen families falling apart with siblings not talking to each other after they're adults, or we do have arguments. We have arguments with our spouses, with our children, with our siblings. But I think the important thing is to understand the love that we have for each other, the commonalities, the things that we have shared together during the journey of growing up. And I think for me, I was never a person who encouraged competition. So I said, each one of you have special abilities, have special talents. Like Ruchika, from the beginning, she was very good writer. Like even at the age of 5, she could write so well. It just came very naturally to her. So I said, you are a writer. Then the next one is Rashi, and she was a great artist, but she would always struggle, but I can't write, and Ruchika can do, she is so good at this, and I'm not. And I said, no, but you're good at painting, and she can't do that. So I tried to...
It's true. It's true. I will never be an artist. I'll just put it here.
This is a very Asian way of talking, okay? This is a very Asian way of...
Yes, Asian mom, for sure.
Saying it as it is. So, so I just kind of let each one shine in their own way and be secure with what you have and be secure even with what you don't have. That's fine. It's fine. The important thing is to be there for each other, to really love each other deeply, and differences will arise. I mean, with everything, even for going out for dinner, we have to choose that, okay, are we having pizza today? Are we having Chinese? Are we having Japanese? We are going to argue about it. That's fine. That doesn't need to be boiled down into anything more than just that momentary argument. So I think that's...
Yeah, I never felt compared to any of my siblings, honestly. And I think even though there's a story about an Indian auntie, I know these South Asian aunties are having a moment with new, TV shows, but there was definitely a couple of our aunties who were very mean and would compare my sister and us.
Yeah, they actually worked at comparing the two sisters.
Yeah, yeah, and driving a wedge between us. And the way you were like, I'm not standing for this. That's not the way that it works was really powerful. Ekin, with you, I think one of the things that I've really thought about so much is how do we invest in the next generation? You work with young people who are really coming into the world at a time where there is just so much of pain and there's so much of uncertainty. What advice do you give to them on how do we navigate this time?
It is a difficult time to define yourself because the world is not defined and you're surrounded by so many uncertainties at any given time. Being a young person, trying to find what you are in the world for is difficult. I think at the moment, and we've been through a lot of uncertainties in history too, but there is a particular, I think, we don't know where to turn to. I too am an immigrant, I came here for opportunities, but there's an instability in where I came for opportunities. And back home, people are trying to move, so there's all that. But I really still believe in humanity and human connections and the value of bonds that we create and how that actually allows us and gives us clues about what's possible. When I work with students, I always say that sometimes we undermine because success metrics tell us to learn skills, do certain things. And unfortunately, a lot of jobs still require those competencies. But what they don't mention is actually the human capital that allow people to find opportunities. I particularly try to be there for all my students, listen to them, make sense of where they want to go, and make personal pleas for them. And they meet many like individuals in graduate programs and undergraduate programs, but the system often makes them emphasize those relationships less, and even learning through those individuals, right? Learning through storytelling, learning through their stories. So I almost think that if we balance that and if we approach that future collectively, as you also call for in your book, collectively and collaboratively, I feel like there's actually even perhaps more possibilities because we're looking at directions that we have not even known about until a minute ago. So that would be my slightly positive outlook.
Thank you so much. I know we're getting to our last few minutes and I want to be mindful of people's time. So my last question really is to you, Lakita. If you think about a world which is expansive and generative, what does that look like? What hope do we have that we can take with us into the future?
Oh, wow.
I know. Just the easy one.
I know. Read the book. I love the question I asked earlier where we talked about personal and systems. Yes. And so one of the things is that personal transformation leads to any sort of transformation we want to see. And so my greatest wish is that we all will be able to lean into possibility and all have the opportunity to go for our biggest dreams. And I think you outline in the book so perfectly how we can think about that and how we can go forward. World building, we have a whole new world that we need to build. And I just have to close out with Uncompete because I think that it gives us the framework for how do we think differently, how do we build what's next. And if we unleash that in all of us as individuals, then we're on our way.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Everyone, another round of applause for the amazing book and amazing Ruchika Malhotra. Ruchika modeled her book today in the talk too. I can't wait to read it. And Ijeoma, if you could come onto the stage too. Congratulations.
Thank you all so much. Get home safe. I hope it's less wet out there. And thank you so much to all of you, to Ekin, to Mam Sima, to Lakita, to Ijeoma Oluo, to Town Hall, to Leadership Tomorrow, and really to all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much.